rather than a lot of deep detail, there was, in the European world, there was a 30 years war, there was a 100 years war, there was a 70 years war, and at probably the culmination of the 70 years war in 1648, that the Westphalian thought and Westphalian treaties, two of them came up, and which said two specific things. One was that nation states, the fact that violence can be done only by the state, the fact that arms can be held within the state only by the state, that was one determination, and boundaries were constructed of nation states. And sometimes this concept was taken outside the world, and we were so preoccupied by boundaries that you see very geometric boundaries in the north of Africa, where a ruler was placed somewhere and a straight line was drawn here, a straight line was drawn here, a straight line was drawn here. So the boundaries and nation states came into existence in the thoughts came up in 1648. And Henry Kissinger has made a very interesting statement. He has said that all the results of the Westphalian order and subsequent progress in that area was done without consultation outside of Europe, except probably North America. And I still believe that. So now this rules-based world order looked at the devastation of humanity against humanity itself. And when few years ago, I was speaking to one of the forums in Islamabad on the killings which have happened in human history, and somebody pointed it out that I must read Steven Pinker. His book, I forget, it's a very complicated title, that the Angels of Human Nature. And it's a positive book. It talks about the fact that there's less killing today than ever before. Probably he's true. And he started from the time of Adam, and he said there were 4 people, Adam, Eve, Abel and Cain. And out of 4, 25% were killed. So starting from that, of course we are better off. But at the same time, I think because of the traveling of human information and of misery, it's a very unhappy world. But I don't have statistics to back me up. I believe I am unhappy, and therefore I extend my thought process to other people, that other people must be unhappy. But somebody asked me a few days ago, how do we convince our children regarding the hope in human nature? You see, don't forget the world, but it's the human footprint on the world which is important. You see, and if humanity steps very solidly in a bad manner on the world, his own home is going to be devastated in the future. So the problems are very big today, and therefore these challenges have to be faced. And these challenges cannot be faced unless diplomats sitting here, unless thinkers affect human policy. And if human policy takes centuries to change, I'll be very depressed, because today the tools of devastation and destruction are in every hand. Let me define that. The weapons of mass destruction, which were managed and controlled through different treaties under the United Nations, non-proliferation, etc., was relatively easier compared to the new tools coming in human hands. The older tools required nation states to develop an atomic bomb. So it was easier to handle nation states rather than every individual. The new tools of destruction can come into human hands in a very democratic manner, or democratic in the sense that it is spread. The tools of artificial intelligence can be very devastating. And it is the slowness of human recognition for that. The first book I read was in 2013 or 14, when Nick Bostrom wrote on superintelligence. But I am glad in this year nations have gotten together to look at artificial intelligence, to look at the dangers of AI. Even the nuclear development which happened passed through very dangerous 15 or 20 possible accidents. And we are alive today, most of us, probably because of the fact that those accidents did not happen. And if you need the history, you will find those 15 or 20 incidents in history. Any accident could have led into further use of nuclear weapons. Moving from that, I recognize the fact that mankind has been interested in looking at the footprint of environment. And I will bring you back, what inspires me sometimes is the love which is around also in humanity. And what inspires me is Rumi in this regard, that without love and without the anchor of love in human life, life will not go in the direction where there will be peace. And therefore he starts from within himself. He says, you must recognize yourself. There must be love within your heart. Open up your heart and see where you have hatred and try and manage that. Then he says, then you look for love in your family, in your immediate family. And then he says, look for love and push love in your neighborhood. Then he says, in your nationhood, push for love. That's the fourth step he states and he takes. And then he says, look for love in humanity. He goes beyond that. He goes beyond identity of nationhood or identity of religion, and he goes beyond that and he talks about humankind. But then he makes the sixth step, which is very important. And Rumi, a few hundred years ago, imagine he makes the sixth step. He says, look for love and love every creation of nature or of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every creation. Whether it's the clouds, whether it is the stones, whether it is water. And that is the first time I read really in that manner, that humankind must be looking for a comprehensive love situation. Then he says, love your God, love your Prophet, and then love your God. You can't start from up down. You have to start bottom up. You start loving within. And it is very important that all the prophets of the Abrahamic tradition and other religions around the world have looked for peace, have looked for prosperity in humanity through peace. Whether it's Jesus trying to feed the people, trying to offer the other cheek, but at the same time didn't have too much effect. Why? Now that is where I come up with why. It should have had it. Where you have prophets unable to change mankind. So what is happening? So how can we, with all that following, none of you can ever think of any following, even 1% of that. So what is happening with all that following of Islam and Quran? And the Quran says if you kill one man, you have killed humanity, and if you save the life of one man, you have saved humanity. It doesn't talk about Muslims or Christians, it talks about human beings. With all that message around, humankind ignores that. Now, let me come back to what... so I was saying the fact is on environment, and before that, I believe the Prophet ﷺ talked about the fact that if we do ablution before namaz or salat, you must take care, even if you're sitting on the shores of a river, to use water in a conservative manner. So if I look throughout history and I look at European history, I had just forgotten the name of Carl Gustav Jung, and I just recollected sitting here. For the sake of environment, he isolated himself for the modern pleasures of electricity, etc., and he finally settled on an island on a lake in Switzerland and lived there all his life. He was famous because he was a dream psychologist, and people from the world over came for its consultation. And he had given up and he started living with the environment, because the consciousness of the fact has started emerging. This was in the 50s. The consciousness of the fact has started emerging. So, while I am confused at this, what will happen, and I am appealing to the human side of humanity and peace and love. At the same time, when I look at the world order, how did it come into being? It said nation states. It then, after the two huge wars which resulted in the death of 50 million people in the First World War and about 100 million in the Second World War, my numbers may not be so accurate, the United Nations got together, met in San Francisco. There were other people in the 19th century and the 20th century who proposed that there should be no war. This concept is important, ladies and gentlemen, for you to understand also. They proposed the concept of no war, and in that, one of the leaders of that movement was Tolstoy, the author of many novels, Anna Karenina, etc. And he was in the Crimean War, and he was surprised at a very young age, in the 20s, he was surprised at the fact that the war led to so much bloodshed, smell of blood in the entire area, and then all of a sudden they decide to take out the white flag of truce for a day. You come out, shake hands, bury your dead, bury the limbs, bury everything, and the next day come out again, take out your guns and start killing again. He could not comprehend what is happening. So what were the rules of war? The rules of war, and therefore he started a movement, and supported by an Austrian lady, forget the name though, and they started the movement of no war, and they even challenged the International Red Cross and the conventions coming up. They said if you humanize war, it's not going to ever be humanized. And you've seen, despite these conventions in international society, when nation states decide, some of the nation states decide to violate these conventions, they hide and violate, they dehumanize mankind. And then they're free to violate whatever they want to do. They decide something somewhere, then because of vested interest, they change everything. So they challenged that, for example, when the Red Cross was being established, they challenged the fact that Henry Dunant, who was the founder of the Red Cross, and
डॉक्टर आरिफ अलवी का एसटीपीआई की तकरीब से खिताब। एसटीपीआई की काविशें काबिल सताइश हैं, ऐसा कहना है सदर डॉक्टर आरिफ अलवी का। उन्होंने ये भी कहा